Hello, welcome back to another video. My name is Gemma, and today we're going to be wrapping up all the books that I read in January. So January was a pretty good month. I read 14 books in January, which is, I think, quite impressive, and I DNF'd one. And we have like a huge range of stuff. I read poetry, I read YA, I read sci-fi, fantasy, literary fiction, pretty much every genre you can think of I read, except from romance, because we don't do romance on this channel. So let's talk about what I read. Before I talk about the books, my one goal for the year, if you missed my goals video, I will link it below, is to read more books by non-British, non-American authors than books by British or American authors. That was badly phrased, but hopefully as we go through the year, I will get better at phrasing that sentence. So, how did I do in January? I read 29% of books by American authors, 36% of my books were by British authors, which means that only 35% were by non-British, non-American authors. So I am behind on my goal already. However, I have full faith that I can catch up. But I did read books from 7 different author nationalities in January, so I'm pretty pleased with that. So, what did I read? And we will talk from the most pants to the most sparkly. Okay? So, starting with the DNF, Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. What is that book about? Honestly, my face was just like, pretty much for the whole hour and a half that I listened to it, that was about as much as I could manage. Oh, there was one sentence that kept getting repeated. I can't remember what it was, but I will put it up. And I was just like, really? At the end of every paragraph? And yeah, so this was to do with the bombing of Dresden, but there were aliens. That's pretty much all I caught from the hour of audiobook that I listened to, and I was like, no, no, that's not for me. I like sci-fi, I like historical fiction, but the way that this was smushed together and the narrator voice, I just no, just no, no, no. So yeah, that book is now officially dead to me. Let's move on to my worst book that I actually finished. And I do feel a little bit bad about this one because this I was reading for a read along, the Into the Library read along, which is hosted by Ange at Ange's Book Chatter and Amy at BookTube with Amy. Their channels will be linked below. Please go check them out. And they are reading the Aurora Teagarden murder mystery series, which started with Real Murders by Charlaine Harris. And this is a cozy mystery. Cozy mysteries are not for me. I think a few people did say to me before we even started, not sure this is going to be your jam, Gem. And they were 100% right. I don't like cozy mysteries, or I certainly did not like this one. I just didn't like the main character. I found her really irritating. There was some romance in it, which also was very irritating. There was one scene, right, where the main character, Aurora Teagarden, is in the supermarket, as you do. She's very short. We're told this many times. We're whacked around the head with this fact that she is a short person. And then a guy walks in that she's only met once. She met it on the day she found met him on the day that she found a dead body, right? Okay, so it's not like they're busy friends. It's not like they've got this amazing chemistry. She's literally met him once. And he says something along the lines of, oh, let's go home so I can pick you up and see you better. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Is that like appropriate? Like, come on, material? Maybe because I've been in a relationship for 15 years. Maybe I'm just out of the loop. Maybe I'm out of the loop, and maybe that is what people say to people that they've only met once on the day that they found a dead body. But it didn't seem realistic to me. So just no, and just I'm not supposed to be cozy mystery, so you're not supposed to have I don't know, any sort of emotions. Like the guy, his wife died, sat there afterwards and who I think the sentence was something along the lines of he sat there looking very glum. It's like, no shit, Sherlock, his wife's just died. No, didn't like it. 2 stars. But with the caveat that I'm the kind of person that doesn't like cozy at all. Definitely not cozy mysteries. Definitely not for me. Moving past that, we move into 3-star territory, where hopefully I will be less ranty. So I read Paper Girls Volume 1 by Brian K. Vaughn. This is a graphic novel. I picked this up on Scribd if you are interested. So this was billed to me. Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf mentioned it to me. And she had seen it described as like a female version of Stranger Things. And I was like, okay, I like Stranger Things. I can get on board with this. And it was good. It was enjoyable. I kind of feel ambivalent about it. I think because I've read a couple of Tilly Walden graphic novels in December, and I loved them, and this just wasn't as good. So it kind of is one of those I will probably forget about. I know there are more in the series. I might try them because they're quick reads, but yeah, I thought it was fine. Next up, we have The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. This is a bind-up of the 2. Wow, look at this, shiny, shiny. This is a bind-up of the 2, but I only read Tom Sawyer, and I buddy read this with the lovely Alice at Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. This is a difficult one to review. I was close to DNF in this at the beginning. It started strong, and I liked like the mischievousness of Tom. I thought that was really well done. But good God, Mark Twain needed a better editor because there was so much boringness at the beginning of this book. Once it got going and the real plot sort of kicked in, and it was very sort of like swashbuckling pirate treasure baddies, and it was quite fun to read. It was dark in places. But the second half was definitely stronger, and Tom's character was definitely good. I think Alice and I both described him as a shit version of Anne of Green Gables. So it was that kind of vibe, but Mark Twain, I don't feel have really gotten into his stride with it. So obviously I have got Huck Finn in this as well, who is Tom Sawyer's like busy mate. So I think me and Alice are going to read that together later in the year to see how Mark Twain's writing evolved, because I believe Tom Sawyer was his debut. So we shall see. Just a comment that there is some racial issues in this book because of the time when it was written. So just be aware. But yeah, 3 stars. It had potential, didn't quite reach that potential, if that makes sense. Next up, we have Ghostly Tales, which was illustrated by Bill Bragg and is a collection of ghost stories from Victorian authors. We have some real big names in here. We have Elizabeth Gaskell, Charles Dickens, Robert Louis Stevenson, you know, that guy. And like most short story collections, it was a mixed bag. I'm going to do a solo review of this, sort of highlighting the stories that I really liked, because there were some in here that I really, really enjoyed. There were some that I did not. I think my experience with the Victorian authors is they quite often take a little while to get going. You know, you settle in and you're like, right, okay, I need like 50 pages. I need to give this author 50 pages to sort of set the scene and get all the classicness out. And so some of that was present in these stories, and so like most of it was scene setting, and then there was 2 pages of action at the end. So yeah, I will talk about this a bit more in detail. I gave it 3.5 stars because there were some 5-star stories in here and some 2-star stories in here. So yes, watch this space. Next up, and we are now into 4-star territory, we have Mayflies by Andrew O'Hagan, and I read this for the aforementioned Ange and Amy's book club, the Fiction Addiction book club. Again, they are linked below. If you want to join in, we are reading The Anomaly in February. But Mayflies, this was very much a tale of 2 halves. The first half of this I really didn't enjoy, and the second half I adored. So in this, we are following a group of Scottish boys. I think they're from Glasgow, and in the first half, they basically take a trip to Manchester and you sort of see their life as teenage boys and all their hopes and dreams and ridiculous antics and all of that sort of gubbins. And then we jump to future timeline where one of the characters is diagnosed with cancer. And I won't say any more than that because I think the more blind you go in, the better. But it's about the relationships between him and his friends, one friend in particular, through that period of his life. And that I thought was beautifully done. If you have read it or you are going to read it, there is a live over on Amy's channel where Ange and Amy discuss the book, and there's some comments, and yeah, it's a nice one to discuss. It's a nice one to pick apart, but the beginning of it just let it down for me. The beginning wasn't strong enough for me to give it more than a 4-star. So yes, I did really enjoy it. I would recommend it, but yeah, that first half, I would say if you can get through that first half, the second half is worth pushing through. The next book I finished was another graphic novel, and that is A User's Guide to Neglectful Parenting by Guy Delisle. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Who's a French-Canadian author and has written many graphic novels, which I would like to get to all of them. And this book was brilliant. It was super short, really quick to get through. I think it took me less than an hour to read through it, but it was really funny. Just about the things that parents do and say to their children that are ridiculous. And yeah, I had a great time with this, especially because I picked myself out in many of these. The first sort of story, I suppose, in particular, where he talks about the tooth fairy and the fact that he forgot, like many nights on the trot, to put the tooth fairy letter and money under the pillow. I may have been there myself. So, but yes, highly recommend. Great fun read, and I look forward to reading more of his work. Next up, we have Immune by Phillipp Detmer, which is a non-fiction, a journey into the mysterious system that keeps you alive. And I'm going to be doing a solo review of this. That will be coming out. That will be my next video to come out. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I was also very kindly gifted this by Tandem Collective in exchange for an honest review, which is what is coming. But this was a great, easy access non-fiction on the immune system. So I will give you some more details on this next week. Next up, The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, which I buddy read with the lovely Becky from Teacup the Storyteller. We did a slow read of this. We were reading it for probably about 8 weeks, something like that. And this was a solid fantasy story. It wasn't the best I've ever read, but it was engaging. I really enjoyed it. I could appreciate what Samantha Shannon was trying to do. It's set in a queendom, which was quite refreshing to read, and you have multi-POVs and dragons. It's very difficult to synopsize, is that a word? A fantasy book without sort of spoiling it, but I do think it was well done. Dragons are a part of the East, but not the West, or the other way around, and you sort of see these two communities clashing, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. But Samantha Shannon set out to create a standalone fantasy here, and I think it just lacked. It was all build really till about 60-70% world building, which was brilliant. But then the action all happened very quickly at the end, and I felt like it was rushed because she was trying to finish this standalone fantasy book, which now is no longer a standalone because I think there's a prequel coming out any day now. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good, fun read, but there were a few little niggles with it, I would say. Next up, and I am quite frankly shocked that this has come so high up the list. So in 6th position was All the Men I Never Married by Kim Moore, and this is a poetry collection. Who am I? Poetry got 4 stars. So this is another one that's available on Scribd if you are interested. And I saw this recommended by Jen, the librarian, in her best books of the year, and she said it was a fantastic poetry collection looking at a woman and her interactions with men and the abuses that she has suffered through that, as well as the positive, but it was probably more on the dark side. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds like a subject matter that I would be interested in. I will give it a go. And I was not disappointed. Some of the poems in here really struck a chord with me. It was blank verse, is that what we call it when it doesn't rhyme? You can tell I'm well into my poetry. And I think that helped me to sort of get into the flow. There were some, I'm not going to lie, that I was like, what? But there was some on there that were so exquisite. I could not give this less than a 4-star. I would recommend, if you are not into poetry, this is a brilliant place to start. It is very, very accessible, and particularly if you're interested in feminism and women's experiences, then yeah, definitely give this one a go. In at number 5, we have A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. I was pretty nervous getting into this book because I DNF'd the Book of Form and Emptiness last year, which won the Women's Prize. And a lot of people have enjoyed that book. And I was like, oh, I don't know if Ozeki is going to be an author for me. And I started this book, and probably till about 30-40% in, I was like, oh no, I don't like it. I might have to DNF it. And I was reading this for Kim at Middle of the Book Marches book club, and also because it was one of Scott's favourite books from last year at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. I was like, oh no, I don't like it. And then things got dark. Things got real dark. And I was like, holy macaroni, this is a good book. I would say, so this book is split timeline. We have a character, Ruth, based on the author, who finds a diary, the diary of Naoko, and she is a young teenager in Japan writing her diary, writing her experiences. And you sort of like flip between Naoko and Ruth. To be honest, could have cut out all the Ruth bits and it probably would have been a 5-star book for me. The Ruth bits were where Ozeki is trying to make the book more literary, and it's got all these like hidden meanings, and there's some magical realism in it, and I just didn't care for it really. But the Naoko sections, wow, Ruth covered a lot of topics here: mental health, suicide, bullying, trigger warnings for pretty much every topic you can think of. And Naoko's narrative voice in this was fantastic. I thought I would be quite irritated by like a teenager's diary voice, but it was so marvelously done. There were also some side plots, particularly one around Naoko's uncle, who was a kamikaze fighter, a kamikaze pilot in the Second World War, which I found really interesting. And actually on the book club, I got a couple of great recommendations. Say thank you to those people for books to sort of expand my knowledge around that area. But yeah, I really liked it. And then it was going really well, and then Ruth ruined the end bit by trying to put in some physics around what had happened, like some quantum mechanics explanations, and it just didn't float my boat. So unfortunately 4-star, but the Naoko section's 5-star. So I would definitely recommend this book, but just, you know, you probably only need to like read it with half an ear through the Ruth bits. Next up, we have We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adiche. This is a very, very small book. It's like 50 pages or something, about feminism in Nigeria, predominantly. Feminism as a whole, but she does very much focus on her experience as a Nigerian. So I just want to address the elephant in the room, that I am aware that Adiche can be problematic, and some of the things that she has said, particularly around supporting J.K. Rowling. I'm aware of that. And so I kind of went into this book to see what her views on feminism were, given that she has supported J.K. Rowling in some of the horrific comments that she has put out. And I think it is a cultural, and this was very, very culturally led. And that was what I enjoyed, and that's why it's ranking quite highly, because it really puts a pin in um, feminism in Africa and the difference between that and sort of American or British feminism. It's very, very different. The challenges are more, um, the reasons to believe for men in feminism are smaller. And this really is a book written for men to read, to say, look, this is the situation, sort your shit out. So yes, I thought it was really educational. I already had it on my Kindle, so I thought I'd just bash through it. And yeah, I thought it was enlightening. Next up, we have my fave, Becky Chambers, with Record of a Spaceborn Few. This is the third in her Wayfarer series, and it is now very clear that these books are, though they're set in the same world, they are very standalone. We follow a completely different set of characters in this book, though one has been mentioned in the first book. That's really the only link. And we follow a wide range of characters in this book. There are a lot of characters. And it did take me a hot minute to sort of get my eye in on that. But in true Becky Chambers fashion, it was delightful, heartwarming. There was a sad bit in the middle. I'm not going to tell you about it, but it's very much about community life on a what they call a homesteader, which is basically like a big city, space city, I suppose, in the sky, and what that looks like and how people interact and the sort of differences between these humans that live on this homesteader, because it's all people who've come from Earth, and like the alien populations around them. And yeah, I really, really loved it. I would say this is probably my least favourite of all the Becky Chambers, but I still gave it 4.5 stars. So that tells you that I did really enjoy it, but just a smidge less than the others, which was not the general consensus among the group that I read it with, because I read this with Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot, Sarah at Freshly Read Books, and Fraser at Simon's Springboard Thought. And we are having a blast reading loads of sci-fi together. And they all thought this was better than the other two. So, yeah, slight difference of opinion, but I think generally everybody enjoyed it. And yeah, if I haven't said it enough, pick up some Becky Chambers, because you'll be doing yourself a favour. In second position, we have a YA book. I historically don't get on with YA very well, probably because I'm an old adult, not a young adult. And I read Naughts and Crosses by Mallory Blackman. I've done a solo review, I will link that below. And my socks were officially blown off. This, and I think Jack actually put a comment on that review and said it may be marketed as YA, but great books are just great books. And I think that is absolutely the case with this. I saw it last year with Anne of Green Gables. Yes, it's a children's book, but it's just a great book. And in this, we follow two characters. The race situation has been knocked on its head. So whites are the inferior race and blacks are the sort of dominating race. And we follow these two teenage characters, Callum and Seffi, as they sort of try and navigate that. I won't tell you any more. You can check out the review if you're interested. It's spoiler free if you're interested in a few more details. But this got dark. This got real dark. And we know I love a dark book. And Mallory Blackman is just a genius. So if you want to hear me wax lyrical about that, check that video out. I think everyone should read that book. And then in first place, I am delighted that it was Five Little Indians by Michelle Good, which was the book that I was reading for the Read Across Calendar Challenge for the province of British Columbia in January. So this is a year-long readathon that has been set up by the lovely Jolene over at Bookworm Adventure Girl. I will link the announcement video for that below. And she recommended this as a potential for British Columbia, and I picked it up. It was on Scribd, and it was amazing. In this, you follow 5 characters in their sort of journeys after leaving an Indian residential school in Canada, and you sort of see how the trauma of that affects their lives going forward. So you sort of flash back and flash forward, and it was beautifully done. The characters were so realistic and so distinct, and it also educated me on an area of history that I'm less familiar with. We don't learn anything about sort of the, is it called the Indian law and the residential schools and that sort of thing over in Canada. We don't learn about that in the UK. So my understanding of it has only been from what I've read really over the last couple of years, which isn't a lot. And this has definitely opened my eyes to some of what happened, what possibly is still happening, and I would highly recommend this if you want to sort of clue yourself up a bit on Canadian history, but in a very accessible way. I would say digestible, but there are a lot of trigger warnings in this, so please bear that in mind. But this was outstanding, outstanding, and I think, did this win? I think it won a Canadian Book Award last year before, and yeah, I can see why. It was outstanding, and I'm so delighted that I'm joining in with this readathon because it has discovered my first and only so far 5-star book of 2023. So thank you very much to Jaylene for organising and giving such excellent recommendations. And that's in a whistle stop tour, which I thought was whistle stop, but I'm looking at my timer on the camera and it says 30 minutes, so hopefully I can edit out some bollocks. That was all the books I read in January. I would love to know what your best books of the first month of the year were, so let me know below. I will also leave my Naughts and Crosses review here if you want to check that out, and I will see you all very soon with another one. Bye guys.